Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Hockey Writers Fantasy Forecheck podcast. As always, I am your host, Jacob Strozyk, and I have my co-host,
Jacob Billington. Happy to be back.
All right, glad to have you back today. We're going to run through some of the defensemen in the league that you're considering picking up for this upcoming year. Defensemen can get a little bit tricky depending on the type of league that you're in. But we got a lot of options here that we're going to go through and get you some all-around good choices. Before we go through to all of that, though, I am going to probe my co-host like I usually do for some good stories or otherwise. Did you have any good defenseman pickups in the past for a few years? Anybody, surprise you based off of how they performed in the previous year and they maybe rocketed up or maybe they rocketed down? Give me a positive, negative defenseman story here.
I kind of got one of those each for last year. So my team last year, I felt really good about. I've mentioned this a few times coming right out of the draft. I took Noah Dobson pretty late. Was really happy with that pick. Turned out fantastic. But I ended up taking Mackenzie Weegar very high. Did not work out very well at all. So not high in the draft, but high for a player like Weegar. And I was
high
like,
enough to hurt.
He's going to get his shots and whatever. Like he's going to have those good secondary stats. Might not put up the points, but who knows? Because the beginning of last year, Calgary looked like a wagon. So he was worth anybody on the Flames was worth taking at that point. Weegar did not work out for me. Noah Dobson absolutely did. He was one of the steals in my draft last year.
I've had a few over the years. Carlson last year was a big one for me because I was in the San Jose's bad. Don't bother touching him. He's just going to get injured and whatever else. Then after the first year, I grabbed him. But another one towards the end of last year that I really enjoyed picking up was Mike Matheson. He, just out of nowhere, he started just it might have been just the way my league was structured, but the dude was just putting up points, not even like goal scoring points. He was putting up like regular points, but fantasy point wise, I think he was averaging about 4.2 by the end of our season. So it must have just been the way that our league is formatted that I was getting a lot out of him, but I was like, how's nobody picked up on this yet? And he carried me through big time in my playoff series and ended up winning it. So that was a good one for me.
Perfect. I did pick up Yusuf Alamaki last year. I really like that pick. I want to talk about him a little bit later. But I really enjoyed, or he did really good for my team last year.
There's always sneaky picks. Keep an eye out on waiver wires throughout the year for defensemen because sometimes they'll surprise you. But as far as dipping into the topic, let's go right into it. High-end picks for the draft. There's some pretty obvious choices, but we're going to run through them and still talk about them and why you should pick them up. Top of my list, I got Cale Makar. I don't think there's any better fantasy defenseman in general. He scores goals, a lot of them. He gets points playing on the Avalanche, and he's a key part of it and setting everything up. He's just a good all-around defender, and as far as fantasy goes, he does nothing but rack up points, and he basically acts as a forward on your back end. So, if you're going to pick a defenseman, grab him first.
If any defenseman goes ahead of Makar in your draft, then there's something wrong with that group. It's far and away Makar. He's obviously, like you said, he's like a forward. He puts up all those points. But if your league favors some defensive play, like the like plus minus blocks, hits, whatever, he's not a super physical guy, but he's always going to be one of the first players back. Like he's got that strong two-way game. You should absolutely be taking him. He's going to be a top 4, top 5 pick in almost every draft this year.
Oh yeah, I think he has been for the past probably 2 years almost.
Yeah,
just because of how he plays. So he would be at the top of my list. Give me one at the top of your list. You're picking
obviously,
top
10. Cale Makar's first, but second, I'm looking at your list here, and I'm going to agree with Adam Fox. Just about as good as Cale Makar. I think somehow Adam Fox is still underrated. I know he did win a Norris, and he's been in the talk every year, but I do think that the general population still kind of underrates Adam Fox. He's got the same kind of play as Makar, just half a step down, not even a quarter step down from Makar. Like he's by far the second best defenseman in the NHL, and I would still take him with a top 10 pick.
Yeah, I would too. I have to agree with you, strange enough. You kind of hit the nail on the head. For some reason, he is still underrated as a defenseman for some reason. And I think it's just because of the fact that he's getting overshadowed by Makar a little bit. So if you have the opportunity to grab Fox somewhere in your top 10 of the draft, do it, because he does the same basic stuff that Makar does, and he's still on a good team with the Rangers. So you're not going to drop off really on points or plus minus or anything with him. Rolling down the list, I think it's fitting I start with this since it's a bit of a homer pick, but still, number 3 for me would be Rasmus Dahlin. I think he took a major step last year, both in goal scoring, point production, and physicality. He upped every single statistical defensive and offensive category last year, and I think he's just going to keep building on it for this year. If I'm not sure if he's a top 10 worthy pick, but I'd say top 20 for sure.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it depends on how many people are in your draft, what kind of way they're drafting, whatever. But I do think the top 10 is definitely justifiable. I would say top 15 for sure. He's still developing. He's only 23, maybe turning 24, but by the season, I don't know his birthday. But he's still a very young defenseman. He's still developing. He's taken a big step in each of the last 3 seasons. So I'm really excited to see like how he embraces the Buffalo Sabres as they continue to step forward as well. So he's definitely going to take over. He's going to have some internal competition with Owen Power. Like that's kind of pushing him to be better and better, to be that number 1 guy. But like his offensive production is fantastic. You absolutely want Dahlin on your team if you can.
Yeah, Buffalo scores points, and that's all that really matters to them since defense wasn't really existing last season.
Yeah.
So if you got a defenseman that's throwing up points like Dahlin was, top 15, definitely justifiable. I still say top 20 just because I think there's forwards that would go ahead of him. But that's just my take on that. Give me another one from your list. What do you got?
Before I do that, I will say I do have a slight bias against Dahlin just because as an Ottawa guy, I think that Tkachuk is the number 1 player out of that draft, and I'm always gonna kind of in my head talk about how Dahlin isn't as good as he is, but he really is.
Well, we can fight about that off camera.
Well, wait till we get to Sanderson and Power and talk about them.
That'll be a fun discussion though, because I think they're close. I really do think that they're both really close to each other. Yeah. So we'll go over that a little bit later for sure.
But next up on my list for 4th, there's a big drop off. I think not a big drop off, but maybe for this upcoming season there is. Mm-hmm. I like Heiskanen, but I'm going to go with Josi. I think those two are kind of battling for my 4 spot. But I'm going to go with Josi. Obviously, he put up 94 points 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, another 90. Yeah.
Like
he was pushing that 100-point season. It was ridiculous.
He was pushing a 100-point season that does not get talked about. Like there was not nearly the hype that Karlsson had when he was starting to get close and whatever. And maybe it was because he was a little bit further back at closing in on the season. But he's just like all the same things we said about Makar and Fox. Like he's that 2-way dynamo. He's the number 1 guy on their team. And there's just like it's not even close with Josi. There's nobody pushing him for that number 1 spot. He's comfortable in it. He's deserved it. He earns it. It's like it's so he's so comfortable in that position, but he doesn't let that slow him down. Like he's not being pressured to be the best, but he still does it every single night. And watching him is fantastic. He's going to put up the points. He's a bit more physical than some of the other people we talked about so far. Going to get some more hits. Going to get some more blocks. Excellent pick that I would take in the top 2 rounds anywhere, depending on how fast defensemen are flying off the shelves. Anywhere in the top rounds is fine.
Yeah, I really like Josi. He was going to be my next pick too, because you hit the nail on the head again, just with the physicality. He has that added dimension to him that the other kind of top 3 that I listed don't have nearly as much as him. So fantasy-wise, he carries a little bit more value just because he can cover the peripheral, not lower end, but the non-scoring categories. So I love Josi in that next spot. For me, I'm gonna jump into a New Jersey Devils guy because he has treated me super well in the past during my fantasy seasons. Is Dougie Hamilton. Injury history is really the only problem in my opinion with him, but beyond that, he's consistently a good offensive production player when he's healthy. and he had a good showing last year. I think he's going to carry it into this year with how offensively charged New Jersey is again. So I would put Hamilton in my maybe fifth or sixth choice down that list. He's pretty close with the handful that I have kind of below him, but he's a top end choice for me, top maybe 25 pick.
Yeah, I can't argue with that at all. And especially like they added Tyler Toffoli onto that group. Like they're just so good offensively, and they're going to score so many goals. They're probably going to be top 2 or 3 in goals for the whole season. And Dougie Hamilton, the number one guy, at least until Luke Hughes comes out, he's definitely going to be on the ice for the majority of their goals. He's going to rack up a ton of points. I don't really have anything else to add other than what you added.
The kind of trend here is point scoring defensemen go high, but you also need to get that, secondhand coverage going down the boards. Or anybody else that kind of stands out as offensive, but still, jumps into those other categories for you?
I feel like you're hinting at Victor Hedman, but I'm gonna.
I am, but
yeah,
still.
I'm gonna actually put Miro Heiskanen above Victor Hedman for that
Okay.
category. I think Hedman started to take a bit of a step back. Not a step back, but he's not quite the 2017, 18, 19, 20 Hedman that we've all kind of been accustomed to loving, and one of the best defensemen in the game. He's still easily a top 7 defenseman, but I'm going to put Heiskanen above him. He's younger. He's taking that step. I think that he's going to be one of the next top guys for a long time to come. He plays that two-way game, puts up a lot of offense, especially with that top line that Dallas has, but he also is that I'll go into the corner, I'll go get the puck, I'll make the breakout pass, all these kinds of things. So I really like Heiskanen, and plays the similar game that we've all been used to watching Hedman play. He's not as big and physical, but Hedman was never known for his massive hits and all this stuff. He's just always got his job done, and Heiskanen does the same thing.
Yeah, I feel like Heiskanen might even be underrated in that sense, that he might not just garner the same attention that some of these other players do. But you're right that he does still play that number one role, and he plays it super well. And he does everything consistently across the board. So I don't have any argument against him being in that top, echelon. I have him like 2 spots down on this list, but I just wanted to jump into Hedman because I think he's just overall one of the better consistent fantasy defensemen. He plays for Tampa, and he's Victor Hedman. He scores points. He doesn't get a lot of hits, but he gets a lot of blocked shots. So you get all of the right offensive and defensive options out of somebody like Hedman. And if you're thinking, oh man, I need a defenseman, I'm not really sure who to pick, but he's available in your late second, maybe mid third round, he's absolutely worth grabbing, because if he drops that low, it might have been a bit of a controversy in the years previous, but you're right. He has taken a step, maybe a half step back just out of his overall production, but he's still the same type of player, and he's still going to get similar production. So I think he's worth grabbing in that mid third, late second kind of round.
Yeah. And I mean, people underrate him offensively as well. Like Hedman still absolutely, he's going to get 50, 60 points this season.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just for a matter of playing on Tampa Bay and him and Sergachev being the only high quality defenseman that the team has right now.
Yeah. I mean, Sergachev, we can break down and do it. I don't think he's a top end like some of these other ones quite yet. He can be. I think he has the potential to be. I don't think he's quite there yet. But he's in a bit of a different category as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Last big name, in my opinion, I want to talk about. This might be a bit of a hot take, but I think Montour for Florida is a upper tier defenseman, not just because of how much he jumped off the page this year and how well he did, but with the fact that Florida is kind of hurting right now as far as their defensive core and their overall team. I think Ekblad might be out to start the season, and I think Montour really solidified himself as their number one going forwards. So I think he'll still have similar, playing time. I don't know if he's going to hit that upper 70s or lower 70s number for points that he did again. But I think he could still be in that, 55, maybe 60 on the high end point range. And I think he's worth talking about taking in your third, maybe mid third, late third round.
Absolutely. I wouldn't have him up with these guys that we've already talked about. I think he's at the top of the next tier. He's just right there. If he shows me one more season of, like you said, like 60 points, then absolutely I'll put him up there. Fine. Especially for fantasy. He's fantastic. Every team would like to have Brandon Montour on their team. If you listened to the Cam and Strick podcast, they had him on, and he's so much fun to talk to or listen to as well. And so I don't think he's going to have as good of a season. He's not going to put up, 72 points again.
It was 72 or 73 points. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's not going to do that again, but he is still going to be a really solid defenseman. So top of that second tier is where I'd be comfortable putting him.
All right. Before we go into our next set of categories, here is a message from the Hockey Writers.
Interested in writing for the Hockey Writers? If you have experience writing about hockey, are passionate about the sport, and are looking to take your writing to the next level, the Hockey Writers could be the place for you. Here at THW, you will have the opportunity to hone your craft at one of the world's largest and most respected hockey publishers. You will have control over what you write, be able to seek out media credentials, and be supported by a large network of writers and editors. Plus, you'll get paid for doing it. If you're interested and want to know more about team openings and requirements, please visit the Write for THW page on the Hockey Writers website. A link to that page is also listed in the description.
We're back, and the next, I don't want to say tier, but the next type of defenseman, I kind of titled this one sneaky good picks. And to me, these are players that might fly under the radar just a little bit, but they still have either number one potential or they have breakout potential to a point where you're really going to get some fantastic performances that'll propel you into your upper tiers in your fantasy league this year. And I have one that is on my list pretty much every single year just because of who he is and what his consistency is. And that's Quinn Hughes for me for Vancouver. The dude's an assist machine. He just constantly is throwing up points left and right, not always goals. He rarely ever throws hits. He gets enough of block shots to make it worth picking him up. But if you're a league that values points, like scoring points, he's somebody that you really want to consider just because of how many assists he puts up every year.
Yeah, he's like 60, even 70 points. He's going to get most seasons. He obviously, like you said, the number one guy. Vancouver does not have very many good defensemen on their team. He's out there every opportunity he gets, probably playing more minutes than anybody else even sniffs on that team. But he's making these passes to JT Miller, who scores a lot, Elias Pettersson, who scores a lot, Brock Besser, hopefully he can find his way back. Like, there's so many forwards on that team. Andrei Kuzmenko, who I'm a huge fan of. There's so many forwards on that team that can bury the puck. And he's just always making those passes, always the outlet pass. And they're a really, like, strong offensive team. They just, obviously, they've struggled over the past few years, but they just need to put it all together. Like, they have all the pieces, and Quinn Hughes is probably the most important part of that team.
He hit 76 points in 78 games last year. And why did it feel like nobody was talking about it at all? He's almost a point per game defenseman. That's incredible. So I think he's a bit of a sneaky pick as far as fantasy goes, just for that reason. Anybody on yours you want to throw in?
I'm looking at your list here. You have Evan Bouchard next, and I completely agree. He's taking over that number one job in Edmonton probably this year. From game one, he's going to be the number one guy, passing Darnell Nurse on that blue line. He's obviously, we all know Edmonton has unworldly offense. It's not even funny. It's not even fair. But Evan Bouchard he's going to be quarterback in the power play. He's going to be getting a ton of 5-on-5 play. He's going to be probably playing a lot with McDavid and or Draisaitl, which is that's good for anybody. And again, like we've talked about with like Hedman and Heiskanen, he's a great two-way guy. He's not just offense. I think if you look at like the analytics, his defense is just as good, if not better than his offense. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure.
Close.
He's one of the best two-way defensemen in the game, especially for how young he is. So he's definitely worth taking, especially if you have a keeper league. He's going to emerge as one of the, I'll comfortably say, top 10 defensemen in the league.
Yeah, I really think he's the best candidate for breakout season just based off of what he did last year. And I love the idea that he still might fly under the radar if people weren't really paying attention to what he was doing towards the tail end of last year and into the playoffs. So Bouchard for me is a grab before somebody else thinks of it type player.
Yeah, I would almost reach on him and take him maybe even above a couple of the guys that we talked about, just because he is almost a surefire lock for that breakout season. And some of them might be, I mean, we talked about a lot of young guys, but when I look at I wouldn't take him above Yossi or Hedman, but they are getting up there. They're in their 30s. They might be starting to take a couple steps back over the next few years. It's time to start thinking about how high are you really comfortable taking Evan Bouchard.
I have to 100% agree with you. Another young player towards the top of that might have a big breakout year. He did kind of have a breakout year this year. For me, it was Seattle's Vince Dunn. I think he has all the right tools, similar to Bouchard. Playing in the West has not really affected him whatsoever. I think he's doing well. I like his offensive production. I like his blocks. I like everything about his rounded game. It all depends for me on can Seattle really replicate the success that they had this year. I think if they do, it's going to rest a lot on his back and how much he can replicate what he did. But I think he still has a chance to break out and do even better than he did this year. That's just me, though.
I think he can definitely take another step forward this year. And it's like you look back at the Seattle expansion draft, St. Louis gave Seattle Vladimir Tarasenko, and everyone called them crazy for taking Vince Dunn over him because Vince Dunn hasn't emerged as anything special at that point. But they saw what was going to happen, and they were 100% right. They made the right decision, and he developed into one of the best defensemen in the West. And the extension that he just got, I think it was 7x7,
A little over 7.
Yeah, somewhere around
7.1
there.
something.
Yeah, somewhere around there. And I think Seattle's going to get better this year. They're going to have Matty Beniers in his sophomore year. They're going to add Shane Wright. He's probably going to be playing the full season. They're going to have so much offense on that team that they didn't have last year. Obviously, they have everybody's going to chip in on the offense. Daniel Sprong scored 20 goals on the fourth line. Everybody was scoring goals. But this year, I think they're going to kind of have that high-end, top-of-the-lineup goal scoring that they didn't have last year. So I think that Vince Dunn's going to have a fantastic season.
Anybody else you got that might be comparable? Another breakout candidate or another under the radar pick?
Noah Dobson.
Okay.
I am a huge fan of Noah Dobson.
Okay.
I don't know if you know how good of a season he had last year, but he scored 50 points in 78 games. I think maybe 49. And again, plays that two-way game that everybody likes. He isn't just an offensive machine like his points might tell you. It's really tough playing for the Islander system. It's not Barry Trotz there anymore, but they still play that system. Offense isn't as prominent as on a lot of teams, but they are starting to change. Even over the course of last season, we could see it start to develop into a better offensive team. They're going to have a full season of Bo Horvat. I think there's just a lot more offense to go around on that team, but they also have that defensive stability throughout the whole lineup. So he's set to have a huge season. I think he could challenge 65 points this year, especially if all these guys that maybe struggled last year start to have a good, it's no secret that Bo Horvat struggled in New York, but I think he's going to come back this year, start the year off strong, and going to have a good season. So
do you think he owns that number one D spot on the Islanders, or do you think somebody else is challenging him for it?
I think it's definitely his. There's a couple other players that could get in there. I wouldn't just with the way the Islanders work, I wouldn't be surprised to see Romanov up above him in the lineup. But that's just because they're such a balanced team. They're all going to play roughly the same ice time, I think. So I think it's comfortable. He's going to have power play 1 for sure. But in terms of 5-on-5, I think it's just kind of everybody's going to pitch in their own way.
Okay. I don't really have any arguments against Dobson. I don't follow him personally as much because it's like you said, he plays for the Islanders. They don't gather as much attention offensively and fantasy wise. So it's a little bit harder to pay attention to those players. But if he's producing in that good of a manner, he's definitely worth picking up. So I'm not going to disagree with you, but I don't have any positive points to add to it per se.
Fair enough. Yeah.
A name that I want to throw in the mix, Big Moritz Seider for Detroit. I think he has the potential to step up and be a little bit bigger than he was. He had a bit of a down year since his Calder season, but I think with Detroit being on a bit of an upswing, I'm still not sure if they're a playoff team quite yet, but I think Detroit being led by Seider might be worth a fantasy pickup in that, fourth round, maybe high fifth round as far as defensemen go, if he drops that low, because he has the potential to score points and he throws a lot of hits and he gets a good amount of block shots. So the physicality alone, I think, makes Seider a bit of an underrated pick as far as defensemen go.
Yeah, I like Seider. I think he's really good, especially in his rookie season. I was a huge fan of his game. Last year, I kind of lost interest in him. I wasn't as interested in his play. But for this upcoming season, I do think that he's going to be somewhere in the middle. I think he's going to kind of level out. Obviously, one of the top young defensemen in the league, but I wouldn't have him in this group that we're talking about right now. I would have him maybe a round or two later than some of the guys we're talking about. He's not going to put up a ton of points, I don't think. Like maybe push 40 if he's having a good season, maybe 45. I'm not too sure what that blue line is going to look like because obviously they added Ben Sherratt last year, Justin Hall this year, and while they're not great, they're still good names in terms of NHL players they're going to be getting ice time. Like the contracts that they were given, you're not going to want to play. What did Justin Hall sign for? Like, was it 3x3? I
think so.
Yeah,
it wasn't a lot.
You're not paying Justin Hall $3 million a year to play him for 12, 13 minutes a game. Like he's going to be up. They're all going to be around that 16 to 20 minute range. So I don't know how much ice time he's going to get as the number. He's obviously the number one guy, but I don't know if he's going to get the ice time like most number one guys get.
I think it's not necessarily that he's in like the step below these other players or he's in the, upper tier. I think for me, it was just a matter of the potential for breakout I think that he has. I think you're right that he's kind of that 40, 42, 45 point type player, but I think it's the additional categories that he covers that makes him a little bit more valuable as a fantasy defenseman. And that's kind of why I wanted to throw him in this grouping here.
Yeah, he's definitely valuable. Like if the time is right, I would absolutely take him on my team. I'm not saying like he's not worth a draft pick in the top, I don't know where we're at now, 5-6 rounds. Like if he's still available 4, 5, 6, absolutely. But yeah, there's a lot of guys I'd prioritize over him personally.
Give me a name then. Give me another name.
Now you put me on the spot. Who do we talk about? See, I guess it all depends. Throw
another name out if you want.
I guess it all depends on what you already have drafted. So if all your points are covered, like some of the guys we've already talked about, if you have Quinn Hughes and Dougie Hamilton already, sure, absolutely, I'd take Seider higher than some of these other guys. Yeah, it all depends on what you need. A lot of the next few people that we're going to talk about are kind of on the same level. It's just a matter of what your need is at the time. So I'll kind of transition us into Thomas Chabot, who you have listed next. Mm-hmm. I don't know how I'm going to feel about Chabot this year. He had a bit of a down year last year. He was subpar defensively compared to his standards, at least. And he didn't have a fantastic offensive year. Now, he put up 55 points in his sophomore season. He's capable of that. He's going to be playing most of the season probably with Jacob Chychrun on his right side. Chychrun is the much better defensively sound player. So I think Chabot's going to get a lot of offensive opportunities compared to Chychrun. But either one of them are going to be like, I wouldn't be surprised if either one of them, probably not both, but either one of them put up over 60 points on that top pair this year.
You hit the exact point that I kind of made in my head about Chabot, is that he's probably going to be playing with Chychrun. So he's going to have that freedom to kind of be a little bit more of that transitionary offensive kind of defenseman that he has shown that he can be. So I think with that extra offensive freedom and the ability to make those plays, I think he's going to be a better fantasy asset than he has been over the past year. And that's kind of why I had him in this grouping, because he has enough of a potential increase to make it worth grabbing him on kind of a bit of a reach pick.
Yeah, and even I'll talk about Chychrun a little bit too. I wouldn't be surprised to see Chychrun put up 60 points either. Like he's capable of scoring 20 goals as long as he can stay healthy, which is insane to think about a defenseman scoring 20 goals in today's game. But like in the shortened season, I think he had 18 goals in 56 games. Like it was nuts. He's capable. If you
and on Arizona.
Well, exactly. He led the team in points that year and probably was close in goals too. But if you look up his first goal with the Ottawa Senators, like that's insane, that shot. It was just such a quick wrist shot. And from the top of the circle, he's going to be doing that all the time. Now, power play 1 on Ottawa is going to be quite interesting because obviously you have Chabot and Chychrun, but even Sanderson, when Chabot was out last year, Jake Sanderson looked fantastic on that top unit. So I don't know. It's all going to be up to DJ Smith and how they all kind of work together. Who's going to be able to hold the line better, get the puck to the net, get the puck to the right spot. Either one of Chabot or Chychrun are perfect picks.
Yeah, I like them both just fantasy-wise because they do the right things. Chychrun a little bit more consistently when he's healthy. But I didn't want to highlight him nearly as much because I think he's kind of in that between the top end and this grouping that kind of just filters in those second, third rounds, and those defensemen that kind of fill those spots. So like Chychrun, Morrissey, that kind of grouping where they're still really good, but you're not really going to be reaching in that portion. It's like, yeah, that player should probably go there type.
Yeah, fair enough.
Last one kind of on my list. I want to throw in Rasmus Sandin for Washington. And it's solely based off of what he did after he got traded there. Karlsson was out, so he was playing that number 1 defenseman role, and he was just thriving in it, putting up points left and right. But as soon as Karlsson came back, that production kind of dropped off a little bit. So it really is going to depend on what opportunities is Sandin getting. I'm not sure if he's worth picking up with an early draft pick. I think he'd be worth more of a flyer pick towards the mid 6th, 7th rounds, maybe 8th round. But I think if he's given the right opportunity, or if Karlsson goes down again, you're going to get a lot of boom out of a player like him.
Yeah, I think he's a prime candidate for someone that's going to get taken way too high. He's I think last year he put up 15 points in 19 games. He's not going to replicate that pace throughout the whole season, especially with Karlsson in the lineup. But he's going to get some good opportunities. Like Washington is not in the mood to rebuild. They're kind of retooling on the fly as they go. They're not looking to sell off and give the young guys the top minutes or anything. But I would say I'd be comfortable predicting 40, 45 points for Sandin this year, which is still really good for this kind of tier that we're talking about. And he's gonna have a big breakout year. I think this is his year. He put up a career high of, I think he had 20 with Toronto in about 55 games or so. So he scored 35 points last year. So I think he can definitely take a step up, maybe score that 45-ish points. So.
Yeah, 35 points in a total of 71 games he played. It was 19 with Washington, 15 points, and he had 20 points and 52 with Toronto.
Yeah, so at the rate that he scored in Washington, obviously 45 points doesn't look like it's too far away, but he's not going to score at that rate throughout a whole season, like I said. So over the whole season, if he's scoring at a 45, maybe even pushing 50-point pace, that's perfect. And he's a great two-way defenseman, like we've talked about with so many of these guys already.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's drop into next category, second to last here. These are what I call the hit or miss, the they're going to be awesome, or you're probably going to drop them by the end of your first month type players. And for me, number one on this list, despite his 100-point season, I'm going to put Erik Karlsson, because I think he has absolutely massive potential playing in Pittsburgh. Coming back to the East, I think is going to reward him. I don't think he's going to put up 100 points again. I think he might be sitting in that 65, 70 point range realistically if he's healthy, because he does also have that injury history. So it's hit or miss for me, just because of all of the different factors that go into what Erik Karlsson currently is, as opposed to what he was back when he was in Ottawa.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see, because he's going to be playing with Chris Letang, not on the same pair, but he's going to be 1 and 2 with Chris Letang. Didn't work at all when he had Burns there in San Jose. Mm-hmm. I'd be interested to see how that works out in Pittsburgh. Now, obviously, Pittsburgh has Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Jake Gensel, Brian Rust. Like, they've got a lot of great players. You're not drafting Erik Karlsson for defense. You're not worried about the hits, blocks, plus minus, anything like that. Mm-hmm. He's points only. And I think he is, like you said, if he can stay healthy, I think he's going to take a step back from that 100 points. That's not happening again. But I do think maybe even a little bit higher than you said, like right around that point a game mark is what I would think. And yeah, like I think he's going to be taking a lot of ice time from Letang. It's going to be more of a balanced duo. He's going to be on the first power play. He's taking Letang's spot on that for sure. You don't get Erik Karlsson and put him on the second power play. Like, that's just not. So I do think that he's going to have another great season, especially if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's going to have a bad season. I'm just saying comparative to the 100 points, I don't think it's going to be nearly that high. And I think playing in Pittsburgh is going to help. But it is still that issue of there's too many players that he plays with that want the puck. That's a lot of possession players. It's a lot of guys that like to have the puck on their stick, ready to make a play. So is he really going to be the guy to set everything up from the back end, or is he just going to be making the first pass and letting everybody else kind of cook? So it's how quickly does the play develop after he touches the puck will determine his points. And I think that's why he hits more towards the 65, 70 mark.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, I must say, as a Senators guy, it really hurts to see Erik Karlsson as a Penguin after 2017. And that's also part of the reason why I was really hoping that it was Edmonton that landed him. If Erik Karlsson was on Edmonton, he would be putting up 125 points next year. Like, it would be so much fun to watch.
That would be disgusting. Talk about outscoring your problems.
Yeah.
That would be a whole new definition of that. I got another one on my list. Anybody else stand out to you? You want to jump on?
Zach Werenski is a big one for me. I think healthy and playing his best hockey, he is one of the players that I would have taken when we were talking about like Thomas Chabot, Jacob Chychrun, even probably I would take him ahead of them. But I'm not convinced that he can stay healthy all year. I'm not convinced that he is going to be playing his best hockey. Columbus is on their way up. They're getting some good young guys, but I don't know. I need to see a full season from him. I need to see the good play with a better team, because like when you're an offensive defenseman on a poor team, somebody needs to score the points. So that's kind of where all his come from. He's a decent player on like both ends of the ice, but you're not drafting him, kind of like I said with Karlsson, you're not drafting him for his defensive metrics and his all of his other additions, but he's maybe not going to put up those points if the team gets better.
Yeah, I had him on the lower part of my list just because it really is that injury concern. But on top of that, I'm not sure if Columbus has enough firepower to really boost his points up, even if he is making the offense happen from the back end. I don't know if they're quite there as a team. So I think he'd be sitting in that, 40 range on the low end. But I think if he hits and he's healthy, then he might be sitting up in that 60 plus point range and he'd be worth grabbing. So I wouldn't pick him up in my early draft sections. I'd say maybe 10th, 11th round as a just need to fill a 6th, 7th defenseman slot type player, and you might get a lot out of him if the Blue Jackets really jump up.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And I'll kind of talk about Bowen Byram with this too.
Okay.
The injuries, he's got to stay healthy. He's got to put together a full season. He's had a lot of concussion issues so far. He has the skill to be worth that 4th overall pick, but he hasn't shown that he can do it at the NHL level for a full season. He was like, during spurts, he's fantastic. He's one of the best defensemen on that team, other than Cale Makar. And while there's a lot of amazing defensemen on Colorado, his inconsistency with his health is going to keep pushing him down the lineup, which is really unfortunate to say. But if you can't keep him confident, you're going to want to have Makar, Devon Taves, and Sam Girard in that top 3 spots. So you're not going to want to have him there. You're not going to want to get used to him there. It's just, you have to be able to trust that he's going to stay healthy.
Yeah, Byram has been, and I think he's going to stay this type of player until he proves he's healthy. Leave him off and leave him onto the waiver wire until he's healthy. And then you can pick him up and drop him as needed, because I'm not sure, based off of timing, if he's even worth using an IR slot sometimes, because he's usually on there for extended periods of time, 20 plus games. So it's a bit rough to hold on to him for a long period of time. So Byram, to me, if he's healthy, could be one of those 50 plus point defenders, and he does get a good amount of blocks to go with it, so he gets some decent coverage across the board. So he's one of the biggest hit or misses for me, just for the injuries alone. So be careful with him, but don't be afraid to take a late round pick and see how he starts the year, because you might get a home run.
Yeah.
Right. Another big one for me, especially over the past couple of years, is going to be John Klingberg. He's on Toronto, so he's got that chance to contribute to the offense. And Klingberg has never been a defensive defenseman in any way, shape, or form. So you're only ever picking him up for the points that he's going to be throwing up. Can he be a big enough part of Toronto's offense to be worth picking up? I think he could, but I'm not sure if he will. So again, he's on that, longer spectrum of really not worth it or might really be worth picking up type of defenseman.
Yeah, he's not a guy that I would be looking at to pick up. I don't think that he's going to kind of outscore his negatives on your fantasy sheets or anything. People talk about it's easy to be bad on a bad team. Like, people look at him with the Ducks and say he was not good at all. Sure, you can back that up by saying the Ducks weren't good. Then he went to Minnesota, wasn't very good
there either.
Like, I know it's only been 1 year of him really regressing to that level, and I did really like him in Dallas while he was a dominant defenseman in Dallas, but I don't know if he's going to get back to that point. I think his confidence is going to be way down. I don't think he's going to be playing at that level anymore, and especially on a Toronto team that needs defensive, you need to be reliable defensively. I don't think he's going to get the opportunity to really show. Like, if he was Morgan Riley, he can do that offense. Everybody knows he can do that offense. He doesn't need to be defensive in that position. He's got TJ Brody with him. John Klingberg doesn't have a TJ Brody to play with. He's not
going to play with McCabe.
That's right. You know what? I forgot to have McCabe. I still don't think he's going to get that opportunity. I think it's going to be Liljegren and McCabe playing together. But I don't know.
Good. I
hope he proves me wrong. I really like him. I like Klingberg. I like watching him play. Like, he's so much fun. But I don't know if he gets back to that point.
That's what I'm saying. It's such a difference between if it could be a boom or if he could be a bust. It's really a judgment call based off of where your team is currently sitting. If you have absolutely, neglected drafting any defenseman up to some point, and you're like, I need something. I need somebody who might put up some points. Klingberg is probably like your Hail Mary pass on maybe trying to rack up a couple additional points on your back end, but he's not a grab him before somebody else thinks of it type, pickup. It's I need something. That's kind of where he is for me.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about grab him before somebody picks him. You might want to do that with Dmitry Orlov as well. It's going to be really interesting to see how Carolina, they have by far the best defensive group in the NHL. Like, it's not even close at all.
You're going to get a lot of opportunity there too.
He is, but he's also right now slotted for the third pair left D. If they're going to keep Pesce and Shea together on the second pair, or even maybe bump them to the third pair, Orlov is probably playing with D'Angelo. Like, who knows what it's going to look like in Carolina. Obviously, you have Slavin on the top pair. I think that's the only thing you can lock into stone. So he's not going to score it as, 18 points in like 20 games with Boston.
Yeah, whatever he did with Boston. But that was Boston last year. That's different.
He's not going to be Bobby Orlov. He's going to be...
I like that, Bobby Orlov. You can't be the first person who said that, but it's the first time I've heard it. That was great.
He's probably going to be closer to that like 40, maybe even 45 point mark. Obviously, one of the problems that Carolina has had over the past few years is that they don't have that number one scorer. They don't have like that pure sniper that they tried to get in Pacioretty, but they have offense by committee. So I think that he's going to be a big part of that 40, 45 points. Yeah.
I like it. The only other person I had on this boomer bust list was Brent Burns. And that's just because of age. I still think he has enough offense in him to kind of be viable in the lower tiers of fantasy pickups. But he's not the same Brent Burns that he used to be. He's not throwing hits, not getting at nearly as many offensive chances, so he's not putting up nearly as many points. But I still think he has some value as far as a potential candidate. If he's still playing in the top four, I think he has even better potential. But if he drops and, doesn't end up playing nearly as many minutes, I think he's a drop and not pick him up again unless there's a lot of injuries type defenseman.
Yeah, and I mean, Burns had a fantastic year last year. He wasn't great defensively, but he had 61 points, I think. Like, he had a great year. And he's playing alongside Jacob Slavin. I think he's going to stay there this year unless he really takes that big step back at, what is he, 38 now, 39?
38,
he's ready to take that step back. It just hasn't happened yet, and everybody's kind of like, how long can he keep doing this? And even if it does happen, Carolina can't be disappointed in that. It's expected. But I do think that he's going to start the year with Jacob Slavin again and have another fantastic year.
I'm not disagreeing with him. I'm just saying I think he has that. I think the age factor will be the only thing to catch up with him, because other than that, he's been the same type of player throughout his entire career. So you're not going to get anything wrong if he's still on his game. It's just, if he does drop off because of age, I don't think he's going to be worth enough to hold on to.
Yeah.
All right. Then we'll go to the last category, which is players to straight up avoid. I only really have two players on this list because there was only these two that really stood out as just leave them on the waiver wire unless desperation absolutely kicks in or you need something, anything whatsoever. Top of the list for me is Seth Jones from Chicago. I still don't think Chicago is good enough. Just in general, I don't think he has enough support from any of the other players. The only thing he's really going to possibly contribute is offense. But even last year, he was average at best with those numbers. Yeah. And I'm not sure if he's going to really have a jump up year for his statistics. I don't think he's worth grabbing, and I wouldn't touch him.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go as far as saying don't draft him. Like, if he's one of the last few rounds, I would take him if I still need a defenseman. I'd still be comfortable having him rotating in and out a little bit, but I totally understand your point of view, and it all depends on who's left available and, again, what kind of group I have. If I have some pretty good defensively, like they're going to get the hits, blocks, whatever, I'd be fine adding him. And especially with Bedard, he's obviously the number one guy on that team. It's not going to be Nikita Zaitsev. He's going to get that power play one time. He's going to be setting up a lot of offense. I do think that he can bounce back from a couple down seasons. Now, I don't think he's going to be back to that point that he was in Columbus, but I do think it's possible for him to kind of take that step forward again with the offense.
I'm not saying he's going to have zero worth. I'm just saying, me personally, I would avoid him just based off of the track record, as well as what I think the team record's going to be, because his plus minus alone just makes me want to go nowhere near him. The only other player I have on this list, and this might be a bit of a hot take, but it's just based off of what I think Calgary currently is and how much of a drop-off he had, I would say Mackenzie Weegar. He wasn't physical really last year. He wasn't putting up the points last year. He was still getting some blocks, but he wasn't even close to being the same type of player that he was when he was in Florida. I'm not sure if the Flames really made enough changes to really boost him, unless the coaching change is really going to do that much to affect him. If he's going to play the same type of way and he's going to do the same type of thing, I don't really think he's worth grabbing if he's not doing the things that he was when he was in Florida. So I would say just leave him on the waiver wire, unless, again, desperation kicks in.
Yeah, I agree. Calgary has so many defensemen that are like, obviously the Weegar that we saw in Florida is the best defenseman on that team. I think maybe Noah Hannafin. He's like up there with Noah Hannafin. But he's down to more of a middle pair guy that you're happy to have on your team. Kind of like Ekholm, but again, in that Flame system, it just didn't work out. Obviously, is that going to change with the new coach? I sure hope so. Like I said at the beginning, Weegar really let me down last year. So,
Same.
I need to see him change before I'm comfortable taking him right now.
Yeah, it was too much of a drop off comparatively that it just makes me completely weary of what he is as opposed to what he could be. And even if he does reach those heights again, I'm not sure if that's worth taking a chance on with a draft pick.
Yeah.
Especially when you could take a rookie or you could take a young player like Sanderson, Power with, those kind of mid picks. If you're taking young players or if you have a keeper league, I'm not sure if he's holding on to, depending on how many keepers you get, just because there's so many other options that can do everything he does, but better.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
All right. Anybody else you want to throw in? Anybody else you want to discuss or any comparisons you want to make before we close her out?
Who are you taking first, Power or Sanderson?
Who's Sanderson going to play with this year?
Probably Artem Zub.
I'd say Power just because of play time and opportunity. If at any point Dahlin goes down, Power's number one defenseman. If at any point, Shabbat goes down, you still have Chychrun. If at any point Chychrun goes down, you still have Shabbat. So I think just opportunity based, I'd say Power would be my higher pick. I think he's going to increase his point production, not by a lot, but I think he's going to jump from 35 to maybe 45 this year. And I think he might be at the 6 goal mark as opposed to I don't know if he'll hit 10 this year. I think it'd be a bit of a stretch if he pushes 10, but I would pick him just based off opportunity.
Yeah. I do think that it's possible that, Shabbat has had some injuries over the past few years. Chychrun, I wouldn't be surprised to see him only play 35 games. That's just the reality that we're living in. So opportunity might be there, but it's definitely going to be more probable for Dahlin or for Owen Power. So it hurts, but I have to agree with you. Again, just because of that opportunity. If it's a keeper league, I'm sticking to my guy, Sanderson. I want him long-term over Power. But you can't go wrong with either one of them. And just the way they've played so far in the NHL, they're so similar. You can't go wrong with either one of them. They're going to develop into probably very close to the same player. Obviously, Power's going to have 4-5 inches on him, but
I think another thing is who Power ends up playing with, because after Samuelson, Dahlin, Power slotted in that second line, but right now it's who plays with him. I just put out an article today about who I think should play with him, and that's Clifton. I made a whole case for it, but I still think long-term he needs to find a consistent partner, and that will really determine what his point production will look like and what his overall blocks and maybe hits. He doesn't really throw that many hits, but if he starts throwing it, he might be worth even more. I'm not sure what Sanderson hits look like these days, but I guarantee they're probably higher than Powers.
Yeah, I think so. He doesn't lay like those big thundering hits or whatever, but he's always physical. Like he'll always hit you against the boards and whatever. I don't know exactly what his registered hits were, but they're so subjective because somebody's saying, "Oh yeah, that was a hit. That wasn't a hit. That was more of a rub out and whatever." But he's really physical. I don't know what his hits numbers looked like last year, but either way, like they're.
But he has that element to his game, is what you're saying.
Yes, he has the physicality.
Yeah, Power really doesn't. He's more of a use his size to position himself and protect the puck type player. He's not a throw a hit along the boards, throw an open ice hit. He's just this puck is mine and there's nothing you can do to take this away from me because I'm bigger than you type player. So it's a stylistic difference. But Sanderson will add more value physicality wise, maybe long-term, unless Power develops that to his game. So you're right. They're both worth keeping as far as long-term keeper leagues or dynasty leagues go. It's just really, what does your team need?
Yep. They're both going to be fantastic. So
can't go wrong. All right. Well, we'll wrap that one up. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning into this week's episode of Fantasy Forecheck. Next show, we're going to be talking about which right wingers you should be targeting for next season. And we're going to break down other, center and wings over the coming weeks after that. So we're going to start with right wingers. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your preferred listening channel and to the Hockey Writers podcast and YouTube channels, where you can find everything else hockey related. You can also follow me on Twitter at Strozyk7.
And I'm on Twitter at Jacob Billington.
And you can feel free to drop us a like, and we will keep you up to date on all things fantasy throughout the year. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We will see you next time.